thing I would do is ask you, do you have questions? Because that's when you learn, when you get your questions answered. Then I know I've done my job. At least you've gone away with something, okay? So we're really focused on what the audience needs and what they want. If we do that, we're generally going to be pretty successful, okay? And we can also learn from them. I usually tell my students that I may not know all the answers, and I may not be the brightest person in the world, but I'm also curious about life, and I can learn something from you too. And so I try to learn from my audience, because then I'm getting something out of it too, all right?
Which was the most interesting question you have been asked?
What was the most interesting question I have been asked? In psychology?
Yes.
I think people have asked me this question a few times. What is the meaning of your life? What is the purpose of your life, Jimmy?
When you explain someone,
yeah. I get a lot of questions in Ukraine as to why I might do a free lecture. You know, why I would do something for free.
So what
makes you do something for others when you're not necessarily getting something back from it financially, okay? And it's difficult to explain that because in my culture we're expected to do that. In America we're expected to donate time and resources to other people, okay? In this culture it's a little different. You take care of your family. That's the priority, okay?
But Jimmy, we do have something called public relations, which I think is misunderstood by many people in Ukraine.
Public relations?
Yes. It's thinking in the longer term that Jimmy being here, nice guy as he is, some of him, it would be wrong of him not to be thinking, some of you might go back and say, we really heard from an interesting guy last night, and perhaps your firm would invite him here. I'm sure Jimmy would know I'll be explicit for him. But isn't that a lot of the reason people go to Toastmasters? It's a reason in the background, you're networking. If I were looking for an accountant, I would look first of all amongst the people I know, not only in Toastmasters, elsewhere. People, if you like, I know something about. Or a doctor. Or a psychologist.
Yeah, that's right. Have you guys ever been asked a question in a group that you just had a hard time answering it? And can you give me an example of a time when maybe someone asked you a question and it just
You asked the question today.
Caught you
How
off
will you
guard?
explain 5-year-old baby?
Yeah, okay.
People at work.
That would be a difficult one, except that your children will probably accept the answer that you give if you put it in a way that they can understand. Okay? It might be more difficult to do that if it were like a teenager, because I have worked with teenagers that really didn't know anything about that stuff. I worked with a 13-year-old boy that had no clue whatsoever. He was not a dumb kid. No one had ever explained that to him. And he asked me, what are penises for, other than to go to the bathroom? And I didn't want to circumvent the parent. You know what I'm saying? I think it's the parent's duty to teach this child that, but his parents did not. And so teaching a child about sexual matters at 13 when he didn't know anything, it was a little bit difficult for me because I didn't know how much he knew. As it turned out, he didn't know anything, all right, and was quite shocked, okay, but I had been given permission by the parent to tell him those things. But it helped me because my kids were a little bit younger and I would have the same conversation with them a few years later, okay, so that actually was good practice for me, okay. And again, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, but I wouldn't think too much about it, but you do need to anticipate. Anticipation, plan B is sometimes needed. You can't assume that everything is going to work. I can't assume that my flash drive is going to be compatible with this system. Sometimes it's not. And then you need a plan B. But if things don't work, don't get panicked. Don't worry too much, okay? That just makes the situation worse. Try to figure out what to do, focus on a solution, and just move forward. Most people will accept it. Most people will understand, okay? And again, this presentation probably should take a lot longer, but okay. I'll send you guys the notes, and if you guys want them, okay. I'm going through this very, very quickly. See, I over-prepared, and that's a problem that some public speakers do. We over-prepare, we give too much information, and as you were suggesting, sometimes there's just not enough time to get the information out that we want, okay? What are some other questions that you have? We have now about 14 minutes, and I'm sure somebody must have some other questions.
I have a question. According to body language,
Yeah.
Should we control our body language? Because, different countries is very different. Latin, China people, should we move fast?
Well,
correct.
Because, how many of you guys, first of all, what problem did Bill Clinton have with body language? Did Bill Clinton have a problem? He was considered a great public speaker, but he had a flaw. As governor of Arkansas, there was something he was doing that they said, you can't do this. This is not okay. What did Bill Clinton do a lot as a governor in Arkansas? He went like this. He was used pointing, all right? And they couldn't break him of that habit. They couldn't get him to stop, so what did they tell him to do? He went like this, all right? This, all right? It's called the Clinton thumb, all right? And they couldn't break him of the pointing habit, so they got him just to do this. Now, of course, this is another interesting concept with body language, because in some cultures, I hate to do this, but this is a good thing to do in some cultures, right? Now, I guess in your culture, it's not a good thing, right? But in some cultures, it is a very good thing. It's called the fig sign, all right? And so that's where we have problems. I'm a Greek, Mike. Ask me a yes or no question. I'm a Greek. Can you ask me a yes or no question? Well, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does that mean?
Yes.
Yeah, that means yes. Well, actually, this means, this is no in English, but it's yes in Greek. And I think the Bulgarians have the same. All right, so even a head nodding gestures can be different, okay? I think the point with body language is you've got to be aware of how your body language is affecting the group. Body language is important. It serves as an emphasis for the points that you're making, okay? But you've got to be aware of it, okay? Sometimes I ask people, how do I look? Before, I don't usually like the answer, but, I gave a presentation once 3 years ago, and I asked the person, just before I was going to go up on stage, how do I look? She says, well, your shirt's on backwards, okay? And I had to go and literally, I'm sorry, I had to put my shirt on the right way. I mean, she saved me. All right, okay? All right, so those things happen, okay? So let's review some of the stuff. We want to get attention and interest, okay? We reveal the topic, we tell people what we're talking about, why they should listen, we establish credibility and goodwill, and we give them information that they can use, but we don't use real sophisticated language. That's a word that we were taught last week, right? Sophisticated. All right? We want to use language that is not overly sophisticated, but we want to use colorful language as well. When you're speaking to children, we wouldn't use the expression, do you consume alcohol? Okay? We would say, do you drink beer? Okay? We use the simplest language possible when we're working with children, and we probably do that when we're communicating with a person who maybe doesn't speak English as their primary language, okay? So language can be very problematic. Icebreakers can be good or bad, but generally you want to, again, you do a good icebreaker. Does anybody have a good icebreaker? Do you know what I mean by that? It's just something to get people a little loose, all right? Get people feeling a little bit better, okay? All right? And there's different ones that you can do, but I will talk to you about those later. Let's see here. The use of language. You got to be careful with what we call oxymorons. These are some common oxymorons. I just came up with a few. These are words that actually contradict themselves. They contradict themselves. If you look at those words, in some way, it could be very confusing for a person. All right, and there are hundreds of them. Okay. Honest politician, okay? Moron, okay? Doing nothing. Manny. Manny, when do you...
The hardest thing is to do nothing.
Why is it the hardest thing to do
Because
nothing?
you never know when you finish.
Okay. All right, so these are examples of oxymorons, a full-time hobby. All right? If you're saying these things to an audience, they might be a little bit confused, okay? Okay, so these are certain things to keep in mind. And again, Ukrainians do make a few mistakes. The most common linguistic error that I see here is the bottom one. I really like this is better than I very like this, okay? We don't say I very like this. Now, I know you guys don't say that, but I hear it all the time, okay? Watch what you say. These are all things that have occurred in public speeches, okay? Some of them are somewhat funny if you know the English language well. There are many antiques at the senior citizen sale. Now, okay. Antiques could mean old people, or it could be old objects, okay? The astronauts take blame for gas in spaceship, all right? All right, what kind of gas are we talking about? Okay, could be different types of gas. Okay. Again, I thought these were funny, but I guess nobody else is laughing. Okay. Okay. We have now 7 minutes, so I'm going to take a few questions. There's a lot more material, but your hand went up first, and then I'll get to you. Go ahead.
What offends you as a psychologist? You know, when you speak to the audience, how they can offend you. You talked about distraction.
Yeah.
But what really, as a human being, what can be offensive? Of course, I know that you keep yourself, from throwing things
Yeah, you know.
people, but
Yeah, well, see, I guess as a psychologist, I think people expect me to be cool and calm and relaxed. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if I lose my temper, start yelling, I mean, they're going to say, what kind of psychologist are you? You can't even control your own emotions. So I think it's particularly important in my field to be in control of your emotions, to regulate your emotions. There are times when I wanted to say things to people in the audience, and I stopped myself from doing that, thank God, because once you say something that is out of anger, and anger is a very stupid emotion. When people get angry, they get very stupid. And the worst things I've ever done in my life have been out of anger. And so you've got to be, if you feel yourself getting angry, you have to relax. You've got to tell yourself, not now. Now is not the time to say this, because there's a group of people that will witness everything I say. All right? You take that anger, you take that negative energy, and you put it in your pocket symbolically, and you say, I will deal with this afterwards. But I've trained myself not to blow up in front of a group like you guys. All right. Now, when I'm with Mike, Mike gets a lot of my aggression. Okay. But with you guys and in any public group, you can't lose control, because you lose your job. They won't invite you back to speak. All right. And there are times we just have to bite our tongue. We can't say what we really want to say. You know what I'm saying? We love to say it. We love to say it. But we know that if we do, it's going to cause more problems for us, and so we just say, Not now.